Welcome to Good Thinking. I am very glad you're here. As always, let us know who you are and where you're from. This is going to be fun because I have my good friend Kwame Christian here to help us with good thinking, help us take a little bit of time away from all the time we spend on what to think so we can devote a little bit more time to improving how to think. That's our goal. So welcome, Kwame.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Fantastic. Can I brag on you for
Please.
a little bit? Okay. I'm going to brag on Kwame. All right. Because he is, it's his list of accomplishments and the list of the things he does kind of makes me tired. I don't know how. Do you get enough sleep each night?
I'm working on it.
Okay. Because it's a critical part. Kwame is the founder and director of the American Negotiation Institute. He is also an attorney, a mediator, the podcast. He has the most popular negotiating podcast in the world called Negotiate Anything. And he is, what else? He is a gym rat. He has a little bit of a online chess addiction. I have some people in my family who share that similar addiction. And he is a fellow LinkedIn learning instructor. And I think there's more. Did I miss anything?
There are a couple other things.
Tell us. Come on, brag. Come on, let's do it.
So I'm a law professor at the Ohio State University Morse College of Law, and a professor at the MBA program at Otterbein University, teaching negotiation and mediation there. And now I'm a contributor at Forbes as well, and I practice at a law firm called Carlisle, Patchen and Murphy, because I want to make sure I keep the negotiation skills sharp. If I'm teaching it all the time, I don't want to lose that skill myself.
Right. Fantastic. All right. So let us know who's here, where you're from, and we're going to get started. So this is what we're going to do. First, I have to ask Kwame what I think is my favorite MVQ, or most valuable question. And you guys can weigh in on your answer to this MVQ as well. Are you ready?
Ready.
What did your childhood smell like?
Curry. Oh, that was easy.
Curry?
Yes, that was really easy. Yeah,
Curry?
so I'm a Caribbean American. So first generation Caribbean American. That's why I have so many jobs. I can't, I'm a stereotype at this point. Mom's from Guyana, dad's from Dominica, and curry was always my favorite food. And so we always had curry cooking at home. That was my favorite go-to of all the Caribbean dishes.
I love curry. Now, is Caribbean curry distinctly different from Indian curry or Thai curry, or is it just a matter of like, what's the difference?
So it's Indian curry, essentially, different from Thai curry. So the one thing people often miss about the Caribbean is that it's incredibly diverse. A lot of Asian representation, a lot of Indian. In fact, in Guyana, it's actually, the population is more or less 60-40, 40% Black, 60% Indian. Yeah, so there's a lot of Indian influence, especially in the cuisine.
Okay, that's making me hungry. Okay, so we're gonna welcome some good thinkers into the conversation because it's live and we're doing this. Stephen says, greetings from 70 miles south of the most destructive volcanic eruption in U.S. history. Okay. He's always great because he has to always say where he's from with some little fact, so we have to figure it out. Jennifer is here and excited to watch. Marion is here from Algeria. I got to put my glasses on if I'm going to be able to see all these people. And we have got Omalha from Mali. So we've got a lot of good thinkers coming in from all over the world who are going to participate in this interactive Socratic dialogue. So we're going to do two things. Number one, we're going to start by exploring Kwame's compassionate curiosity framework for engaging in difficult conversations and negotiations. So you're going to you're in for a treat. And then Kwame and I are going to take a very controversial topic, and we are going to have a Socratic dialogue. And you'll see how this is very different than persuasion, debate, or even negotiation. So how does a Socratic dialogue, how do we understand a Socratic dialogue as different, but also part of your framework or for negotiation or even persuasion?
Yeah, so my framework is called the Compassionate Curiosity Framework, and it has 3 steps. Number 1, acknowledge and validate emotions. Number 2, get curious with compassion. And number 3, joint problem solving. And it's a framework that you can put on any conversation. I should have mentioned this. My most important and cherished job is a family man. So married, have a son and another son on the way. And so for me, when I'm having my difficult conversations with my 5-year-old or my wife, I'm using this framework. When I'm mediating or negotiating with opposing counsel, I'm using this framework. It's widely applicable, which is what I like. And so if we really zone in on the curiosity portion, getting curious with compassion, what we're doing is we're gathering information, learning more about the other person, empathizing. So getting an idea of how they see, think, and feel about the situation, but making sure that we do that with a compassionate tone. So the person doesn't feel like it's an interrogation, right? So we're gathering information, and that's where I see the overlap between my framework and the Socratic method.
How does understanding your dialogue partner or your negotiation partner's underlying ideas and beliefs and thoughts, how does the Socratic dialogue or your compassionate framework, that curiosity portion of the compassionate framework frame step, how does that help you understand the underlying assumptions, thoughts, and ideas of your own position?
Yeah, here's the thing that I really like the most about the framework. Look at me getting giddy about this thing, like it's the first time I'm talking about it. It's designed to explore not only the difficult conversations and conflicts that we have externally, but also to help to resolve those internal conflicts, those internal negotiations too. You can use the exact same framework directed internally as a tool for introspection. So acknowledging and validating our own emotions to be more self-aware, and then getting curious with compassion. So digging deeply inside of ourselves and understanding why we feel this way, why we believe what we believe. And then at the last step, joint problem solving, we're reconciling the differences between our thoughts and our mind, our heart and our mind. So what would satisfy me emotionally in this situation? What would satisfy me substantively? So we go into the actual conversation with a lot more clarity. And when I think about the value of understanding ourselves at a deeper level, we get to understand our own biases. We get to understand our own assumptions, because a lot of times we fill in the gaps of understanding with what we want to be true, perhaps, and our assumptions and our biases. And so this helps us to understand what is real and what has been confirmed, and understand the difference between that and what is just generated from ourselves.
How much does that require preparation before the dialogue? And how much does that require some kind of mental agility or nimbleness during the dialogue? Is most of the self-exploration required as a preparation, or is there a way to stay nimble enough to discover that while in the middle of the dialogue?
I think it can be both. What we should do is think ahead. One of the things I always talk about in my negotiation trainings is the importance of preparation. And so, free gift for everybody if they're interested. If they go to our website, americannegotiationinstitute.com/guide, they can get access to over 15 free negotiation guides. Business negotiation, conflict resolution, salary negotiation, how to have difficult conversations about race, politics, all those things for free there, and it'll help you prepare systematically. So that's one of the things that you can do to prepare and understand which questions you're going to ask during the conversation. But when it comes to the introspective process, I think this is something that we should do beforehand as well. Coming into the conversation, what biases and assumptions am I carrying into the conversation? What do I really want and why? And just not go with the surface level response, but actually dig deeply to figure out our true motivations. I think that's important. But as you start to develop this habit of introspection, you'll be able to do it a lot faster. You'll be able to do it in the moment. You'll be able to do it on the fly. Because a lot of times in these conversations, actually, I'd say the majority of the times, we're going to be surprised by something. something, especially if we go in with the intellectual humility required to ask good questions, right? We're going to be surprised by something. And then we have to say, all right, okay, that's new information. Interesting. I'm responding in a way that I didn't see coming. Where did that come from? And you're going to be able to do that a lot faster the more you practice the process.
Fantastic. All right, this is good. So I hope that some of you are bringing Socratic questions to the chat, because this dialogue is going to involve you as well. Michael, welcome from Toronto. Celeste, welcome from Cape Town, South Africa. We have got some great good thinkers. Please let us know who you are and where you're from. And also go ahead and feel free to Google best Socratic questions, because we're going to try to explore our underlying beliefs, ideas, thinking about a very highly controversial topic, which has to do with Confederate statues in the United States. Now, a little background for those of you, many of you good thinkers from outside the country, like Bodhisattva from India and Ali from Pakistan. We're going to give you a little background. So the little background, just a very brief background on what's a Confederate statue. The Confederacy was 11 Southern states, 1860 to 61, who seceded from the Union, and was their main kind of goal was to upkeep the institution of slavery. So that became the Confederacy against the Union in the American Civil War, which ended in 1865. Okay, so that is the background. So a Confederate statues are leaders of the Confederacy. Did I simplify that enough?
Yeah, and great job with the numbers.
Okay, well, yeah, so that's, and this has become a hotter issue as racial tensions and racial issues have come to the fore in recent years. So we've got shootings in African-American churches. We have got the rallies / riots in Virginia. We've got George Floyd. And during all of this time, this becomes a hot button issue where these statues are toppled, they're graffitied. What else? Anything else I should add that is just factual background? And I want to say hi to Tahar from Saudi Arabia and Pam from Texas. And how do we get more replies for inquiry? So we'll bring some of these questions into the chat as well. But anything you want to add to that background?
Yeah, and I think even more so than the fact that they've been vandalized recently is the fact that people are constantly talking about it. Different cities are discussing whether or not they themselves, as a municipality, should remove the Confederate statues themselves. And so communities are really grappling over this issue. And then even people, probably the majority of the people who are talking about it, don't have a statue like this in their community, but everybody is talking about it in the US when this kind of conversation comes up. So I think it's used almost like as a proxy war for other significant issues that we're trying to deal with, but it's something that comes up pretty frequently.
Yeah, so this is a good one. And what we're going to do is I'm going to ask Kwame what side he wants to take, and we're going to have a Socratic dialogue. And the Socratic dialogue is really intended to get to your point with the compassionate curiosity, to get to the underlying ideas, beliefs, assumptions, thoughts that we have, not to influence, cajole, debate, persuade. Totally different goal, right?
Exactly.
Now, there is a time in your framework for that kind of persuasion? I'm assuming that there is a time when you switch from compassionate curiosity into persuasive mode.
Right. Absolutely. And it's after we've worked through the emotional challenges that usually come up during these conversations, and we've taken the time to gather up as much information in the joint problem solving stage. This is when we can layer on persuasion and higher level negotiation techniques.
So if we want more of that, that will be time for another conversation, because this is smack dab in the sweet spot of compassionate curiosity with Socratic dialogue. So in the chat, if you have strong opinions about what should be done or what shouldn't be done, this is not the time for that. I'm sure you have great evidence, persuasive ideas. But this is a time for questions to explore where those ideas come from, how you benefit from those ideas, what underlying assumptions, and help us understand Kwame's too. So what side do you want to take?
I will take the side of leaving the statues up, which probably would surprise people, but I enjoy the challenge of forcing myself to think a little bit differently, especially on strong issues like this.
Okay. All right. So Chi, welcome Chi. Jennifer, welcome. All right. Kwame's taking leave the Confederate statues up, and I am going to take tearing the Confederate statues down. Now, what I need, when I say I mean we. Good thinkers from around the world are going to help me with Socratic questions to get to the underlying beliefs, thoughts, and assumptions, because that's the goal here. Anything
Perfect.
that I've left out before we get started that might help people?
This was a good summary. And quick thing, Becky, just to confirm, how difficult do you want me to be on this? Because on the podcast, when I do my sparring sessions, sometimes I try to take it up to a notch beyond what you think is realistic. Do you want me to be more even keeled?
What do you guys think? Even keeled, or should he bring it? So if you say he should be gentle on me, gentle on us, put gentle in the chat, because he can start gentle. And if you think he should crank it up a notch and just go full Socratic on us, go full compassionate curiosity on us, put it in the chat. So crank it up or bring it down.
Good.
Right?
Okay. And so you want me to, again, be in the compassionate curiosity mode, though, regardless, not kind of be difficult.
Well, you could, if you think it's going to be difficult for me to get to my underlying assumptions because I have not been introspective enough, then you can challenge that. But the persuasive component is not in the mix, because one of the things I find very difficult is when you are in compassionate curiosity, when you're in that Socratic questioning or Socratic dialogue, it is really difficult to keep the persuasion at bay. We are competitive people. That's what we do, is we get into that competitive. So we've got start gentle and hold your ground. Pam says, Ziola says, start gentle and hold your ground. Pam says, crank it up. Okay. So we're not, and Steven says, take it to 11. Okay, you guys are brutal. You're part of this too. You're just brutal. All right. So we've got the background. What do you what you can put in the chat right now? The only thing that you can put in the chat that is persuasive is whether you think we should keep the statues up or take them down. Keep the statues up or take them down. Put your strongly held belief or loosely held belief in the chat, because it will be good for you to see how to explore the why. Why do you feel this way? How did you come to think this? What forms and what benefits do you get from these beliefs? All right. So put it in the chat. Now, also, if you have a country where this is an issue, you have heroes that have been, divulged as not so great to begin with, you can put that in the chat too. We want to know, how does this relate to you? How does this relate to your issues, your personal issues, and the issues that you have in your country? All right. You want to start? You're the expert at this.
Me?
Yes.
I don't have a podcast all about curiosity. I'm a little bit beyond my depth here. But,
no. Let's do this. All right. So Zola says, take them down. Muhammad says, if there is a conflict in your point of view with someone else, then what do you do? Would you try to tell them? Oh, see, the scroll is really annoying me. Would you try to tell them, Muhammad, sorry about this. I wanted to ask this question. Pam says, take it down. I'm going to finish Muhammad's question. Let's bring this in. Maybe you can answer this.
Oh, there we go.
If there is a conflict in your point of view with someone else, then what do you do? Would you try to tell them how you feel, or would you simply ignore because they won't be able to understand you?
Great question. I think it comes down to sequencing. It doesn't need to be an either or. It can be a both and. And I realize that, and when you think about the compassionate curiosity framework, the reason why we have acknowledge emotions up front is because people struggle to think logically when they are in a highly emotional state. And so oftentimes when I recognize that, I'm going to stay in that curious mode and acknowledge the emotions, acknowledge how they feel, let them know that I'm understanding them and listening. And then once they feel completely heard and I recognize that they're starting to calm down a little bit through the process, it's at that point that I share my perspective, when I feel like they're in a position where they're cognitively ready and capable to actually receive my message.
Well, since we have agreed on the parameters for this dialogue, do you feel that that is enough to know that I am emotionally ready to have this dialogue?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Oh, what if I'm not? What if I'm not? Okay. Oh God. Okay. I guess most people, so Pam says take them down. Zaula says take them down. I feel like you've got a lot of good take them downers. So now let's get to the underlying thoughts, ideas, and beliefs as to why to take them down. But you're going to be trying to understand
Perfect.
mine. Why do I want to? Well, I want them taken down. I
Yep.
want them taken down. I always forget which side I'm on. I want them taken down. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah. So I'll start asking you questions. So what led you to this conclusion?
Part of what led me to this conclusion is I tend to not have a high level of reverence for authority. So I don't think that it's wise to venerate other human beings the way we do.
Hmm. And so it sounds like, from your perspective, just correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like, from your perspective, it's mainly on you're focusing on the point that we are all more or less equal, and we shouldn't put other people above regular people. Is that more or less where you're coming from there?
How do you think about equality versus reverence?
I would say that they are important concepts, and both of them can be upheld at the exact same time without there necessarily being a conflict. And so you can still revere somebody and respect what they did, and some of the things that they stood for, while still in your own life treating people equally.
What role do you think the statues play? In general, statues play of humans. What role does that play in telling history?
Plays an important role in telling history. It tells you who the important figures were in history. History isn't an opinion. It is what it is. It was what it was, right? And so whether or not we take down statues, the history remains the same.
What part of history could be an opinion?
The parts that are subject to interpretation. And so we have the facts, and then we have what people think and feel about the facts. And so I think those interpretations are the opinions, but the facts are what they were.
Okay, fantastic. I'm going to borrow some questions because I have a benefit because I have questions in the chat. You have to be on your own.
I know.
So Mohammed says, let me see, let me bring this in. So let's see if we can see this. Continuing from my previous question, and sorry, the scroll is going so fast that I cannot get to all the questions. And Kwame, you don't see the scroll. So, and we have questions coming in from both LinkedIn and from YouTube. So it's a lot. And I don't have a moderator because COVID. So I'm doing the best. So continuing from my previous question, if that person constantly is not understanding you, and more importantly, that person is close to you, what would you do then? Would you prefer leaving that person, even if that person is your wife or maybe sister? Okay. That's a good question, but it's not really it's not a Socratic question, but it's a method question that might help us with this Socratic dialogue. So I think it's a good question. Do you mind slipping out of Socratic dialogue to answer that?
I'll take a shot at it.
Okay.
I think let's go back to the introspective process of compassionate curiosity. Really what we're trying to answer is what I want and why. And when we go through this process, then we can go through a process of prioritization. What's more important to me? Is this particular issue more important to me? Is getting the outcome that I want more important to me? Is the relationship more important to me? Okay, great. So how can I approach this issue in a way that still is respectful and maintains the relationship, right? How far am I willing to push? And when am I going to pull back, considering the sanctity of the relationship? And so I think that it's a fantastic question, and it's a question that we all need to wrestle for ourselves, given the circumstances. But we have to have this introspective process if we're going to come to the right conclusion.
Fantastic. So with that, I'm going to get to your underlying reason, your beliefs and your thoughts about the sanctity of the statues. How am I supposed to think? Now, you mentioned the sanctity of your ideas and kind of getting to the root of that. How am I supposed to think about you're wanting to keep the statues up? Like, what would be the best way for me to think about this, to understand you and understand the reasons and beliefs that underlie your reasoning?
A big part of it is identity. I'm proud of my heritage. I think that's important. And it feels like a lot of times people are trying to make me apologize for who I am, who my forefathers were, and what they did. And so for me, it's about identity. It's about showing my children that we come from a tradition that is something that can be proud of, and there's no reason to be ashamed of it, and we shouldn't run away from the history that we've created, and assume that everything about it was bad, because not everything about it was bad.
And what might you be taking for granted with kind of upholding the pride in your history with statues?
I don't think I'm taking anything for granted, because for me, I'm considering how other people feel, but then I feel like it's often juxtaposed or put in contest with what is important to me. And so it feels almost unfair that my feelings need to be subordinated to somebody else's feelings.
Can identity exist without history?
I think identity can exist without history, but it's difficult. And even though that's a good hypothetical situation, it's not the situation we have here, because we do have the benefit of history and records to demonstrate what that history is. So if you're in a situation where maybe you were adopted or an orphan or something like that, and you don't have any history, then you can still create your own identity if you happen to find yourself in that situation. But thankfully, I don't have that situation. I have a lot of documented history that I can rely on.
Nice. What would you be curious to know about why I want to take the statues down? What would be the best question that you could ask me to get to deep understanding of why I think it's important to take these Confederate statues down?
I think the question I would want to know is, how can I have pride in my family history?
How can you have pride in your family history? So when you see these Confederate statues,
Mhm.
do you feel an identity with these statues
I
that
do.
gives you a sense of pride? What
Yeah.
else gives you a sense of pride? What other extrinsic monuments or things or flags or symbols
Mhm.
give you a sense of pride?
Um, the the Confederate flag gives me a sense of pride. The looking at different monuments, like the Liberty Bell, gives me a sense of pride. The Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, those type of things, those give me a sense of pride. What else? The Statue of Liberty, that gives me a sense of pride as well. And so I think it's those type of things, like Mount Rushmore as well.
Mhm.
Just pride in the American tradition, and how what it took for us to get here.
Can leaving the statues up persuade some observers that the evils of the Civil War weren't really that bad or worse or even noble? Could leaving them up have those unintended, or I shouldn't say unintended, should leaving them up have those consequences?
It I think anything can be misinterpreted. So I would say yes.
Okay. All right. And what about would the statues being taken down actually change history?
No, it would not. Great question. Very, very good
Okay.
question.
Okay. So we've got some great Socratic questions. All right. What do you want to ask? What is the best way when engaging in this kind of Socratic dialogue for it to be a dialogue versus an interrogation? Because I know, like in law school, the professor stands up there and he or she conducts the Socratic conducts the Socratic method. How do you and I go back and forth? Like if I'm trying to find out you and you're trying to find out me, how do we do this?
Yeah, it's tough. I'm having flashbacks of law school as you say that. Yeah, it's really tough, because I think what we need to do is we need to be a little bit more mindful of the signals we get from the other side. This is actually a specific slide I have in in my trainings. I call it the gas pedal and the brake pedal. Sometimes if we are asking these questions, it's like they have their foot on the gas, they're sharing information. Then they start to put their foot on the brakes when they start to realize, wait, they're asking all the questions. I'm just giving up all this information. I don't feel safe anymore. So they start to slow down. And so once we start to see those, the responses get a little bit shorter, the body language becoming a little bit more restrictive, then we have to recognize this person is not being safe. It's not feeling safe in this moment. And so we need to use a little bit of reciprocal vulnerability. I'm going to then put my foot on the gas in this conversation and share a little bit more about me, about my perspective, about how I feel, and maybe something that might not be something that makes me appear very strong, like almost like a confession, right? And so it creates a little bit more of trust and a little bit more psychological safety, so they don't feel as though the conversation is so one-sided.
Okay, so this is good. So when you said that these statues give you a sense of pride and remembrance of your history, then I could then maybe instead of interrogate you with another question, I might be able to open up to share some of my thoughts, ideas, and beliefs. What I did was I just hit you with another question.
Right.
So that's not really the best way to do it. But part of it is because there are so many good questions in the chat. I mean, I have, can looking back at history, would it make you bring back the history and have the same old systems again? And I have, could the statues be used as a teaching tool? So all of these things are great persuasive questions. I don't know if, and maybe they could get to the underlying beliefs, but I think we're slipping a little bit into persuasion with these things. So there is a line between really understanding your underlying beliefs and supporting them and defending them. So how can I say something where I am defending my belief or exploring my belief, but without defending it too much? Then I'm slipping into persuasion. This is like that fine, this is hard.
It's really hard. But I think, Becky, this is a great example of why it's so important to think about this in terms of an intellectual exercise, right? Because the way that we're having this conversation isn't a natural way. But if we think about it like athletes, right? If we're playing basketball, the coach doesn't say, hey, everybody, practice, here's a ball, play. They would say, we're working on jump shots, we're working on layups, we're going to take just a small portion of the game and drill that portion. And that's what we're doing here, because like we're seeing here, these are great questions. The challenge is sometimes they slip into persuasion, because just based on the questions that have come in, I feel that with a high degree of certitude, I'd be able to determine whether or not they think the monument should go up or should go down. That's the challenge. And so I think really what we have to do is we have to ask these questions in a way that demonstrates genuine curiosity, where an outside observer would be able to say, yeah, I don't know where this person is coming from with this question. And that's why I think it's so important to prep beforehand and think through the questions that people could ask during the conversation. So it's a little bit easier, because in the moment it can be very challenging.
Yeah, it's super hard for me to slip into, stay away from debate mode. One of the questions that comes to mind that might be perhaps more evaluative of your underlying thoughts and beliefs is, if you could erect a statue for any hero, who would it be?
Oh, okay. I'm still in character, right?
Oh yeah. So now I know your position on the statue is busted. No, yeah. Let's say that what would be hard? You guys, I don't think I should make it easy for Kwame. We've got to wrap up pretty quickly, but I don't think I should make it. I think that you should stay in character, but really understanding, I don't know exactly who you are in this character, but yeah, let's stay in character. Who, if you could erect a statue, I'm talking about anything, a chess master, an NBA player, a hero of whatever, a scientist, anyone in the world, who would, in character, who would you pay to have a statue erected to honor?
In character, I would say it would be Jesus Christ, like the big statue that they have in Brazil.
Ah, that's good. And why honor Jesus Christ with a statue? What
Because
does that do?
in character he is God incarnate, right? He represents everything good about humanity, and in character I feel as though this is the person who we should all aspire to be like and live out his principles under the Christian philosophy.
All right. So I think that question, if I have to say that if any question gave me more insight into Kwame, the character who wants to keep the statues up, it would be this one. And
Yeah.
that's why I think some of the, and that would be, that's a question to ask out of curiosity, because I literally was curious who you would suggest erecting a statue to honor. And I think that is really telling. What would be the number one question that you would ask me to get to the underlying beliefs and assumptions?
I think I love questions that start with how. Just a simple
Mhm.
question. And again, this is a trick I learned from you, just starting it off with out of curiosity. Out of curiosity, how did you arrive at this decision, at this conclusion? How do you believe what you believe? How do you know that it is true? Right. And for
Mhm.
me, it helps not only to get an understanding of how they got to this point, understanding their decision making matrix, right? It serves me a benefit down the road if I do want to shift into persuasion mode, because it serves a purpose right now, because genuinely it's quite fascinating to see how people arrive at their conclusions. But also down the road, it helps me to say, all right, if I do want to persuade this person, there are some mechanisms that I can use to persuade, right? Because for me, in character, like the example that you gave with that question, which was a brilliant question, by the way, now you're understanding my moral code a lot more. It's not so much about the statues, but when it all comes down to it, a strong portion of my decisions are going to be based on my religious ideology. And so those types of questions that really get down to the fundamentals of who the person really is and how they determine what they believe, I think those are the most powerful types of questions.
And it's interesting because if I was staying in character, but genuinely tapping my own thoughts about taking the statues down, a little bit of digging beneath the surface would find that a lot of my reasons are not tied up in identity. My reasons are probably more tied up in my moral foundation. And my moral foundation, I have a very personally, I'm going to be telling you the truth, I have a very, very low authority and sanctity moral foundation.
Mm-hmm.
So if one of the reasons that I think about the Confederate statues specifically coming down has to do with the orderly, considered exploration of consequences versus having them all stay up and having people destroy them and having people take action, their own action, where Columbus comes down and Jefferson comes down and Dolly Parton comes down. No, Dolly Parton would never come down. But, all of these things versus a considered exploration of why and then a negotiation around that. So that has to do with my, and also sanctifying people with statues and stuff is kind of counter. I have a very, like I said, a very low moral foundation of authority and sanctity.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's great. And
yeah.
of course, I love the reference to Jonathan Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind. So if anybody out there is interested in political psychology, check that out. Moral foundations theory is fascinating. So yeah, I saw that very early, very early. And in my character, then it would be authority and sanctity would be really important when it comes to the like my foundations too in this character. So yeah, that plays a big role.
Yeah. Well, I thank you so much for engaging. Tell us, you guys have any other burning questions for Kwame as we wrap up? And Ali says, let me bring this into the chat so I can read it at the same time. What I understand from the chat and discussions, the outcome of negotiations will result in a compromise. Maybe I'm wrong.
It depends. When it comes to negotiations, compromise is often like a dirty word. And I tell people it has to be strategic compromise, right? If we're talking about a transactional negotiation, we don't compromise unless it serves a strategic purpose. Am I advancing my position? Becky using these chess terms, right? Am I advancing my position through this action, right? The other thing is when it comes to issues like this, we don't want to compromise our values or our morality during these conversations. That's something that's very important. So I think especially when we're having these tough conversations about sensitive issues, we have to get some clarity again before the conversation about our moral code, so we can be a little bit more nimble during the conversation, so we know where we're willing to bend a little bit and where we need to stay firmly rooted.
Fantastic. I also think that never underestimate the power of a pawn. And the pawn, I think of the pawn as seemingly innocuous questions in terms of advancing your position, but very, very useful in extracting the underlying thoughts, beliefs, moral foundations of your dialogue or negotiation partner.
Yep. Exactly. And as we're wrapping up, and I know questions and comments might be flowing in, I'll say this. As I was giving these answers, I was thinking to myself, man, in the future, could you imagine if somebody just takes clips of this and posts it and says, look what Kwame believes?
Oh, see now, but I'm glad you said this, because I want to say one final thing. One final thing is that establishing the context for the conversation is important, regardless of whether you're just practicing Socratic dialogue, practicing compassionate curiosity, or you're actually engaging in the dialogue. So there has to be a level of trust that I am not going to cut this video, take out a little extraction of Kwame saying that he wants to keep the Confederate statues up and erect a statue of Jesus Christ, because that would be not very trustworthy of me.
Right.
I will not do it.
Oh, I'm not worried about you. You're good.
All right. Well, thank you for engaging. I also think that you cannot just jump into compassionate curiosity if you don't practice. Right. So find someone to practice with.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's a great challenge for everybody, right? Practice. If you have the opportunity to interact with a human sometime this week, I guarantee you'll have an opportunity to practice.
This week might be a good week to practice Socratic dialogue, not debate and what comes from a heated debate sometimes. Let's calm it down. Let's calm it down. So I thank you very, very, very much for joining this conversation. And we'll try to kind of even get into the chat if you have questions afterwards. Jennifer says, unless he wanted to tear down Dolly Parton, at which case we're cutting the video and putting it out there. I totally agree. Michael says, thank you very much for that half hour of learning. A lot of thank you Kwame's in the chat. Thank you. If you want to tune in to you or connect with you, please tell us the best way.
Yes. So connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm trying to post things pretty frequently there. And then if you like podcasts, Negotiate Anything, it's the top ranked negotiation podcast in the world. I think those are two good places to reach out.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Be sure that if you want to join Good Thinking, you are tuning in most Mondays right here on LinkedIn Live and on Becky Saltzman YouTube Live streaming simulcast, and 9 a.m. Pacific time in the US, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Subscribe. If you want notifications, hit that bell button. Next week, we are going from compassionate curiosity straight into persuasion, because I'm bringing Brian Ahern into the hot seat, a mutual friend. So thanks again, Kwame. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you staying an extra 14 minutes past our live broadcast as well.
Oh, my pleasure. I didn't even realize time flew by.
Time flew by. All right. Have a good day. Thank you.
You too. See ya.
Bye-bye.